Hi Tommies, my name is Mahad and you're listening to The Bulb, Minneapolis Edison digital collection of true and personal stories. We believe that storytelling involves healthy risk-taking and can transform the practice through which we build stronger communities.
Edison High School in 1960, a pupil's letter. Dear Mother, I arrived here at Edison this morning and certainly found it a nice school, although rather different from what it was when you were there. According to your description of the place, it has changed considerably. They put on 5 more stories and have put in many conveniences of which I shall tell you in due time. After leaving Aunt's house in Chicago, I hopped onto my plane and arrived at Columbia Park in an hour. There is a hopping off and landing place on the top of the school, but as we are near the park, I left the plane there and thereby got a little walk to school. Upon entering the main door, I stepped into the elevator and in a jiffy was taken up to the top floor where my room is. As I entered the door, a bellhop took my coat and hat and gave me a check, which I pocketed. My class teacher is a nice old man named Mr. Aldstrom, who was here, he says, when you were. He often talks of a boy named Pete Verlo, whom he called in those days an embryo lawyer. Whom do you suppose he means? Why, none other than the greatest criminal lawyer of today, Sir Peter Verlo. He also talks of Little Red and Texas. Again, whom do you suppose he means? Only Russell Sawyer, the fiery orator of Congress, and Donald Ingerson, millionaire banker and pawnbroker. I heard him say that Ben Brainerd is now editor-in-chief of the New York Times. He also says that William Sears, the genius of your class, is now teacher of geometry on the 3rd floor. I have geometry today for the first time, and I'm going to ask Mr. E. Nordquist, who is now principal, to put me in Mr. Sears's class. You know that there are 6 classes of each subject, as the school has grown from 2,000 students to 6,000. Well, I started out to tell you my experience at the first day's work. My first subject is chemics, which is a mixture of old-fashioned physics and chemistry. Luckily for me, the laboratory is on the top floor. There are so many halls on that floor that I stepped into a telephone booth nearby and asked the main office, on the ground floor, to send me a guide. He came at once and will be my personal guide or attendant until I have learned to find my way around. After that, I shall keep him to carry my books to the miniature elevator, which saves me from fatiguing myself lugging them into the regular elevator with me. When I found the chemics room, I was met at the door by a bellboy who showed me to a first-class seat with a fine mahogany desk. I feel rather crowded, however, and shall ask to be given a larger desk. I was introduced to the teacher, who asked me what books I needed. I told him that I had none, and he phoned down to the supply room, and they sent up all the books I needed on the miniature elevator, which is in every room. I have a fine desk light, typewriter, mathematics machine, telephone, and running water at my desk, all of which is rather convenient. After that class was over, I had a study period for an hour, so my attendant took me in the elevator to the 2nd floor, where each student has a separate study room with all the conveniences as the chemics room, but it also has a bed to use if one feels worn out. After the study period was over, a bell rang at my desk informing me to report to geometry. My teacher, Mr. Sears of your class, is the nicest man you ever met. Our desks in this room were not so nice, not having a phone. We have, however, a very clever invention. It's a machine which saves us from walking to the blackboards and standing. We turn a switch, and the part of our desk where we write is lit up. There's a glass cover on these, and we insert a piece of paper under it. Then, taking a stencil, we write the proposition on the glass. The whole thing is transmitted to the blackboard, and we can see the thing worked out as nicely as one could wish. It took me several minutes to learn how to work the invention, but now I find it very simple. After geometry was over, I took the elevator up to the top floor and had English with Miss Elwell. She's a pleasant old lady who was here when you were. When class was going on, I began to feel hungry, so I telephoned to the restaurant and they had them send up a nice lunch to the classroom. While the teacher was explaining to Ray, the son of your old classmate, that eat was a transitive verb, I assisted her by showing how the action was carried from doer to the receiver. It took me a whole meal to explain, but when I was finished, he understood perfectly. When that period was over, a boy invited me to go in his plane to the Eastside Baths for a swim, as we had a half an hour free time. We went up to the roof, and in 10 minutes we were at our destination. If I'd used my machine, we could have been there in 5. We put on our bathing suits in the air and had a 15-minute swim, getting back in time for algebra. When we did get back, we found out that we need not have bothered to go since there was a beautiful pool in the basement below the gym. The mathematics machines that we have for algebra are a fine help. In problems, all we have to do is put down the equations. The machine does the rest. This was the last subject we had the first day. However, all the students have to stay in after school for half an hour and do their work for the following day. When we were through, some of the boys suggested that we run down to Gladstone and have another swim. We followed their suggestion and had a splendid time. I will have to have the carbon removed from my plane. The fastest I could go was 310 miles per hour. One of the boys got up to as fast as 340, but that was not fast enough to beat a 60-ton Navy plane that passed us on the way back. That plane must have been making 400 miles per hour. Oh, I saw an old battleship at the Philadelphia Navy Yards. I would like to see one of those stay in the water for 5 minutes with one of our modern planes on top of her. I don't know how those things could have ever been good. The government did not do any good when it scrapped those boats in 1922. It should have scrapped the air fleet. It's a wonder that we have not had a war since then. I really expect to see one soon. Patagonia fights Bolivia for supremacy of the air. Well, I think that's all of interest that happened today, except that I took a young lady out in my plane this evening and just brought her home. It's now 2:30. She did not enjoy herself. We went up to Niagara Falls and I spent over $40 on her. She said she wanted a glass of good whiskey, so I had to take her to Canada. Gee, the girls of today are different from those when you were young. Can you imagine? She wanted a glass of whiskey. No thimbleful for her. You can bet your boots on that. Well, tomorrow I shall have French under Miss Virgie Partridge, and I shall let you know what kind of teacher she is. Your loving son, Mac.
This has been a product of ETSN, Edison Tommy Student Network. It's your story. We'll help you tell it.